Welcome back to the Friden STW-8. The first video, which if you haven't watched, you should, goes through all the main sections of the calculator and what all of these little buttons do, because there's a lack of videos talking about these levers here, which add such a huge amount of functionality to these, and turn this from just a simple four function calculator into an adding machine and essentially a computer. This is probably as close as you get to a computer before it becomes an actual computer. So, I mean, at the time this would have been considered a computer, but you know what I mean. This video is going to go over the four main functions, and then there will be a third video which will go over the extended techniques and how to use some of these fancy buttons and do stuff like running to grand totals and things like that. So we're going to start with addition and subtraction, and then we're going to do multiplication, and then we'll move to division. Okay, the first thing we're going to start off with is addition and subtraction. They're the easiest. So for addition and subtraction, if you have decimals, since this was used mostly for money, I'm going to set it up with 2 decimal places just for simplicity, and I'm going to set the accumulator to also be 2 decimal places. The counter does not really need decimal places. It's just being used as a counter to count how many calculations you've done. I set my decimal place the same place I have my keyboard here, and we'll go ahead and add 5 plus 5. Start with an easy one. I'm going to put the add lever down. The add lever clears the keyboard after each calculation. So I'll go ahead and type in 5. Nothing in the row is a 0, so we type nothing after the decimal, and we hit plus. And there we have. You saw the counter advance by 1 because we've made a calculation, and you'll see the accumulator accumulated 5. Now we want to add 3, and we can go ahead and push the addition again. Add. We have 8, and the counter advanced by 1. Now let's say we want to subtract 7 from 8 to give us 1. We can go ahead and hit the subtraction key here, and you'll see the counter decreased by 1 because a subtraction is a negative calculation, and we have 1 left over from subtracting 7 from 8. I'll go ahead and clear the carriage, and let's move on to multiplication. Multiplication involves using this portion of the calculator. Now, it might be a little bit difficult to see from this distance the small numbers in the window here. I will tell you what I'm adding into the multiplier section there. These should be pretty visible. The black on white shows it pretty good on the camera screen. So let's say I want to multiply 2 figures. Let's say we're working on an invoice. The largest amount of decimal places we're going to have in our numbers, either our quantity or our price, are going to be 2 decimals. So we set the keyboard to have 2 decimals, and we set the slider here, which is the decimal place for the multiplier, we set it to 2 decimal places. So let's say we have something to multiply here. Well, we also have, since we have decimals, we have to set up decimals in our accumulator and our counter now. Since the keyboard has 2 decimal places and the multiplier has 2 decimal places, we have to put this at 2 decimal places. The multiplier and the counter always have the same number of decimal places. That's something to keep in mind. And the accumulator decimal places is the number of decimal places on the keyboard plus the number of decimal places in the counter. In this case, 2 plus 2 is 4, so we will set this at 4 decimal places. That is where our answer is going to appear. So we'll go ahead and let's say we have an item that costs $2.50, and we sold 3 of them. We go ahead and type 300 because it's 3 decimal 00. Remember, we have 2 decimal places there. And we go ahead and hit multiply. And there we go, 750. It puts the multiplier into the counter there. It says 3. Go ahead and clear the carriage. Now in multiplication it will clear the carriage, but it's kind of a force of habit. I just tend to clear the carriage after an equation. But the multiply and the divide will automatically clear the carriage for you. Let's do one more. Let's do 2333, and the person bought 2 of them. And we go 2.00, and we hit multiply again. 46.66, and there's our 2. So that's all pretty cool. I'll show you how it auto clears. If I want to multiply 20 by 6, hit multiply, you watch. It will first move the carriage all the way to the left, clear it, and then start the multiplication. And there we have 120, and we multiplied it by 6. The last 2 things we'll talk about in the multiplication section are the Accumult and the negative malt. These keys are very handy if you want to do multiple equations one after the other, and you want to add, you want to have a running total. So let's multiply 25 by 2 here. We put 2 zeros for our 2 decimal places. And I'll go ahead and hit multiply. Now, remember, on a multiplication cycle, we automatically clear the carriage. We want to add to that 50. We're multiplying another 2 numbers, but we want to add the product to that 50 there. So what we can do is we can type in the numbers we're going to multiply. Let's say we want to multiply 20 by 3. Okay? We want to add to that number Accumult instead of malt here. And you saw it didn't clear the carriage. Now it added that to our total, and it actually added the new multiplier that we added to the previous multiplier to give us 5. Now the negative malt does the opposite. It subtracts the product from our running total in the accumulator here. So if I do 25 multiplied by 2 and I hit negative malt, it also doesn't clear, and what it does is, you saw, it's subtracted from our total, and it even subtracted the multiplier from the existing multiplier that was already there. So that's very handy if you don't want to erase what's in there and you just want to keep adding or subtracting from it. You have multiple equations to do. They're a very neat feature. So that's the multiplication. It's pretty straightforward. I won't get into these 2 keys yet, but I will show you the repeat key, but I will come in for a closer shot for that so you can see that. Alright, let's talk about the multiplication repeat. Now that we're closer in, you should be able to see the numbers when I type them in. So I'm not going to show you the upper display when we do the equations. Believe me, the numbers are actually there. I just want to show the repeat function, which is very cool. So let's type in 2350. Remember, we have 2 decimal places, so it's 2350. Now I'm going to multiply that by a random number over here. And I'm going to just hit multiply now and show you what happens. It will make it disappear. You can see it counts down, and then it goes away. But I wanted to use 2350 again for another equation, another multiplication. So why would I want it to go away? Well, if I want to lock it in there, I lock the repeat key down. Doesn't let me push any of the buttons. Doesn't let me push the multiplier clear. So I'll go ahead and put the carriage here, and I'll do another random multiplication using this number, and you'll see once it's done, the number will come back, so we can use it again. Now how cool is that? Built-in memory in a mechanical form, and automatically slingshots it back so that we can use that for another equation. Alright, let's do some division, because that's what's really fun on this calculator, is doing divisions, because the sounds it makes are fantastic. To set this up, we use the same formula as the multiplication where the decimals appear. 2 decimals on the keyboard, 2 decimals on the counter, gives us 4 decimals in the accumulator. Now, with division, with the automatic division, you have to select how many decimal places you want using the push buttons that I showed in the first video. These are the resolution of your answer. Now, really, for money, we're going to want maybe an extra decimal place so that we can round up. So we'll make it 3, and 2 plus 3 is 5, so we have to move this over to have 5 decimal places, and we'll set this to 3. Let's go ahead, we'll type 22 in here, and we'll go enter dividend. And because we've set the marker here, we already told the calculator where we want the dividend to be entered, so it enters it right in front of the decimal place for us already. Let's say we want to divide it by 3. We hit 3, and remember, this key alone will make a negative division, which will subtract from the answer from the counter, and holding both of them will create a what they call a true division or positive division, which will add the quotient to the counter, which is what we're going to do. So I'm going to go ahead and push both. And you can see 7.333. We would round that to 7.33 if we were talking money. It puts our remainder up in the upper display, and that's the end of that. Now this also clears automatically. If I want to divide another number now, it cleared everything for me, set this up where I want it, and now I can divide 25 by 2. And you can see 12.5. And that's how you use the division. I'll show you really quickly the negative division. Let's actually try a more round number. Let's just do 20. 20 divided by 2, which should give us 10. And we'll do a negative division, which will make it subtract from the counter. We should get 99999 because the 10 will carry us over to the next number. So go ahead and hit the negative division. And you can see 999990 because we subtracted 10. Because the answer of 20 divided by 2 is 10, it subtracted it from the counter. Really quickly, I want to show the division stop function, which, as I described, is the handbrake in division. So if it runs away, you can pull that and it will stop the function. If I go ahead and type 30 and I forget to type something in, or I decide to divide by 0 for whatever reason, you'll see it'll just keep going forever. We don't want that. Push the division stop key up and it will stop the division. Thanks for stopping by and checking out the 4 main functions of the Friden STW-8. I did go into a little bit more detail than I think I wanted to, but I thought can't talk about the multiplication function without talking about these accumulate and negative buttons, as well as the negative division buttons. The next video will go into some extended techniques, and we'll get into the non-entry button and the counter control button. I already talked about these 3 buttons in the first video because they're self-explanatory. There's not really much to go into depth about. And we'll do some examples from the manual. I think that'll be fun. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and stick around and see the next one.